Morning, and thank you again for listening. It's Mark Morris with Word of Faith Fellowship, and we're so glad you joined us this morning. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Leigh Ann, and she came to our church, Word of Faith Fellowship, in 1987 from Oklahoma. And so she is actually our church pianist. She has done that for many, many years and been a major blessing to our church. If you've been listening to this radio program, you've heard people come on here and sing, and you've heard piano in the background, and that's actually been Leigh Ann. She's come to the studio. We could not fit her in this little studio room if you've been watching live, so she's been right next door. But she has been here faithfully, even coming early mornings to play the piano, as people on the radio program have been singing. But she's been a real blessing to our church, and she plays and gives her whole heart to God when she plays. And she's got a powerful testimony of what God has done in her life, starting way back at the beginning, and how God even placed her in a wonderful home. And so let's go ahead and listen to Leigh Ann.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone that's listening. You know, the more I think about the testimony that God has given me, the more grateful I am for His keeping power and His hand on my life. I was born in 1964 to a loving family. I was actually adopted. And you know how I see the plan of God for my life from the very beginning. The Bible says in Psalms 139, before the foundations of the earth, we were planned for. And I'm always amazed at that. God planned for me. He had just the place to put me. He had the family, the church family. He knew all the steps of my life before they ever were. And that verse has always been so much, or meant so much to me. But I lived, like I said, in a very loving family. My parents couldn't have children, so they, very much wanting a child, adopted me. And they were, at that time, they were in Southern Baptist. They went to Southern Baptist Church. So through the Southern Baptist Mission Board, they found an adoption home in Louisiana. And I was born in September of 1964, and December of 1964, they came and got me. In fact, it was December 7th. It was Pearl Harbor. It's the anniversary of Pearl Harbor Day, so that always is a landmark for me. But they brought me home, and I had a wonderful childhood. 2 years later, they adopted my brother, and we just had a very good home life. It was really a blessing. And one thing I always say about my mom, she really had a heart for God. And the more I look back at her life, she continued to want God's plan and want God's will. It just seemed like she was always looking for God, and every place she'd go, there was a cry for God in her heart. And like I said, looking back, I'm so grateful. God knew exactly what He was doing for me. And then about the time I was 14, God brought my sister, and she was natural born. We all were natural born, but she came to my parents through natural means. And, there's never been a difference. I never looked at myself as any different than her. And we've always had a very, very close relationship from the very beginning. And I love her to this day. She's very special to me.
And actually, I'll jump in here, and she's my law partner. So Andrea, and we've had her on the program with her husband, Josh. Yes. So she's special to me, too.
Yes. And, 14 years my younger, but she's been such a blessing in my life. And I just really love her. And I really love what God's done, in our relationship and just in my life in general. But again, I grew up in a good home. Initially the plan of God for me was to know that I was wanted and accepted. And I really was. And I guess at a certain point in my life, in my elementary years, my parents told me that I was adopted. And I remember thinking how special that was. You didn't hear very often about stories like that. And I thought, I felt different. I felt it just was special to me. And so I would tell my friends, I was adopted. And their response to me was so negative. Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. You weren't wanted. And I felt myself battle that all the time. No, you don't understand. I was wanted more than a lot of children probably were. I mean, it was like a constant struggle to be accepted, to know that I was planned for, that God wanted me, that my parents wanted me. I mean, I really fought that probably most of my life, not even realizing it. And always that little bit of rejection was always there. But and through that, I always found myself never really striving to be the best, or never really striving to want anything better than that little bit of acceptance that would come. So you get the underdog, so to speak, or the people that maybe didn't, have that great outlook on life, and there I'd tumble in with them, because it just seemed easier to be accepted by them. It just seemed to be easier to get in that group. And I can remember about 7th grade, you get to be 13 or thereabouts. I was always the youngest one in my class, and moved to a new. Oh, I remember once my sister came, we moved, and that probably was a pretty major turning point in my life, because I'd grown up in that neighborhood all my life. I had those same friends for 10, 11 years. And now we were uprooting from everything I'd ever known. And we were going to a new place. And so it was kind of like starting all over. And I was in a new school. I didn't know anybody. We were close enough that, far enough away I didn't have a ride to school by my parents, so we rode the city bus. But there was a whole group of us from our neighborhood, and we all walked about 4 blocks and rode the city bus about, 2 miles or 3 miles maybe, and walked another 4 blocks, and we all went to school. But again, it was just all new. It was new people, new teachers, new surroundings. And there was one girl that was in the neighborhood that actually I went to elementary school with, but we were both maybe in the same grade, but she was in a separate class from me. And I was always in the more promoted class, or we had higher accomplishings, I guess you could say. But somehow I connected with her, and she didn't have a great home life. Her mom did drugs with her, and I caught myself one day walking to school with her, and she smoked, and she smoked marijuana. And I remember her asking me, "You want to try it?" And I remember thinking, "Oh, I don't do that kind of thing. I didn't grow up that way. I don't want to." But the more she asked, the more I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll try it." And I did. And I remember in about 8th grade, we got caught by the police, and we were suspended from school. And it just seemed like from there, I just continued a kind of a tumble downhill. It just seemed easier for me to stumble in with the wrong people. And then then I went to a new school in another part of town, and here it was again. New people, new school, and I thought, I'm not going to do that this time. And I dressed up in my best clothes first day of class, and I said, it's going to be different. And I went into class, and unfortunately, you got off the bus and you had to pass right by the smokers. I don't know why they set it up that way, but anyway, so you'd walk by, and day after day you'd walk by, and it was almost like the devil just had somebody to reach out to you. Always to reach out to you. And the next thing I know, here I am in the pit again. And I did that for years. In and out and in and out. And it just was a constant struggle to be accepted by the right group, the right people. And I finally just said, I can never really attain this or this or this. It's just easier for me to go this path. And so I always did. And we still went to church. My mom still really struggled to want to know the right place, the right people, the right path for God for our lives. And I never went against that. That was fine with me. I just had my little side doings that I did. I don't know if they ever really knew what I did. And I went through my whole high school year, and I guess my senior year, I got involved with a boy, and I didn't make all the mess that I did before, but we still did. Well, then I went to college, and totally out from my parents' restraints, and that was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. And I'm a firm believer today that being out from under your parents' authority or the authority of God is detrimental to your life. I'll tell anybody that. And I met a fella, and within a month or so, I found myself pregnant and was going to have a child. And after that first year, I came home, and I was pretty much devastated. And my parents were. And being accustomed to what had happened to me, where they got me, we looked up the same avenue, the same place, the same direction. And, you know, you kind of have that, well, I don't know that I want anybody to know this. And I'm sure my parents had opportunity to think the same. You know, what are we going to tell people? Because it wasn't our livelihood. It wasn't how we lived. It wasn't how I was brought up. And so I went off to Louisiana, did whatever we did to make that all work out. And in November of 1984, I came home and, you know, really had less of a life. I didn't even know where to go at that point.
And was that when you placed your child up for adoption?
I did. And you know, I figured, well, that's what happened to me, and it was good for me, and so that's what we did, and it was very hard. Now I have since met him, and that was probably a great healing in my life. But it was just kind of an accustomed thing to do, and that's what happened. And, you know, somewhere a few years before that, the neighborhood that we moved into, 2 doors down from us, Sam and Jane Whaley moved into our neighborhood. And my sister was young enough at that time that their daughter Robin actually babysat for her. And my mom became very good friends with Jane, and it just seemed that it was the connection, and that place that my mom had always looked for God, it came, and she began to walk real close with her, and they began to travel in the ministry together. At that time, Sam went overseas a lot, and Jane stayed in the States and did a lot of ministry. And so my mom went with her a lot of travels. And of course, I mean, you can just see the plan of God, you know, for her life, for my family's life, for my life. And really, that was the same time that I was in school, or I'd gone to college, or I was even in high school. In fact, somewhere in my high school years, we had, grandmother had prayer meetings, grandmother I call her, especially with my daughter. They had prayer meetings in their homes because Sam would travel. And so we prayed a lot for his trips. So Mom would take me, and, you know, their prayer was a little different than I had maybe ever grown up hearing. We learned a lot about groanings and travails that the Bible talks about, sounds that utterances from heaven that God gives to his people, that when we don't really know what to pray for. And I remember never thinking one thing. It never fazed me that this was odd. It just seemed so normal, so natural. It just bore witness with my heart. And I found myself learning to pray that way. And I knew there were seeds being planted in my heart. And, you know, even going back, playing the piano, I played the piano since I was 4 years old. My mom really had it in her heart for me to play. And it was kind of one of those, I got on the bench and never left. I had a little timer that I would sit on the piano. I had lessons from the time I was 4 till about 12, and I had a 30-minute timer that I set on the piano, and it would ding, and I just kept on playing and kept on playing, and Mom would have to call me to the dinner table. I mean, it was obviously something God put in my heart. And, you know, I played a lot of classical music, and they pretty much said, if you can play that, you can play anything. So that was kind of where I grew up. But I'll never forget, one night going to those prayer meetings, I must have been about 16 years old, and we were praying, and it got real quiet. And Jane said to me, Leigh Ann, go to the piano. And I remember shaking in my shoes because I didn't have any music. I remember thinking, with what? I didn't have any means of doing anything. And I remember sitting on that bench, and I just began to surrender to God because I knew there was something that He wanted to do in me and through me. I had no idea. I don't even know what I played. I don't even know if it was really anything. But it was probably the first step, the first opening of God saying, Leigh Ann, I have a plan for you. And it will never leave me to this day. And you know, I went on about my business. I went on about my life, but that never left me. And I can remember even, you know, we'd go to church, and I'd come home and try to play those church songs, and I never did real well by ear. I was always played more by music than anything, and I can remember even buying music books of the world, and I could not do them. I couldn't do it. And I look back today, and I think, I know that was God's plan, because that wasn't God's will for me. And in fact, to this day, I don't use any music. God teaches me. God teaches me his notes, His chords, His sounds. It's amazing. I just can't get over that God, He knew that before the foundations of the earth, and He chose me. And you know, in that regard, I'll have to say, you know, I was thinking the other day about Moses. And when he went up to the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments, well, actually, when he went up to the mountain, I think at one point he was watching his father-in-law's sheep, and he saw a bush, right, and it was burning, but it wasn't consumed by the fire. And he said, he left the flock. He said, I've got to go see what this is. The presence of God was drawing him. And when he got over there, God said, Moses, take off your shoes. The ground you're standing on is holy. And it wasn't just a light, take off your shoes, Moses. The ground he was standing on was holy. And I'll never forget, you know, that was the fire that God was beginning to bring him through to say, this is the call of God on your life. And He began to tell him what he was going to do. And I remember, you know, and in the book, Moses says, me? Is that really what you're going to do? Me? You know? And I just have to think time after time after time, the fire of God has come and said, Leigh Ann, you're not going to do it like the world. And you're not going to do it with the hand of man. And you're not going to do it by your own means. It's going to be by the anointing of God and by the Spirit of God. And I have felt that fire over and over and over. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Because I've watched God work in my life beyond what I could ever do. Beyond what I could ever do. And I'm just so amazed at His miracle working power in my life. And anyway, like I said, when I came back from New Orleans, there was no other place I could go but up. And we'd been to those prayer meetings, and I knew God was drawing me. And somewhere in that year, about 86, I enrolled in Bible school. and they're in Tulsa, in a pretty big school in Tulsa. And I went for a year, and I'll never forget people in that Bible school saying things about these prayer meetings where people were making strange sounds. And I remember thinking, that's me. He's talking about me. And but I knew that's what God had for me. And so about a year later, well, actually maybe a year just prior, Sam and Jane moved to North Carolina and came here to Rutherford County. And in 1987, they were going to start a Bible school. And somewhere in the beginning of that year, my mom had handed me an application and said they're going to start a Bible school. And I grabbed that application. And I knew God said, it's you, Leigh Ann. You're going. And it was fighting the gates of hell to get me here. But we did it. And I had a little green Mustang and a pile of furniture that we put on a trailer, and Mom and I drove a U-Haul, and my dad followed in the car, and we got me here. And it's been the hand of God ever since, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And you look back and think what the devil meant for evil, God had a plan. And really, every person on the face of this earth, God has a plan for your life. And you can't look back and think, well, who am I? Who am I accepted by? I fought that power and that principality all my life, being accepted or not being accepted. And the devil saying, who are you? Who are you to think that God could use you? You've done this and you've done this. I mean, I fight that devil to this day, and I still tell him, you're a liar. Get behind me. You don't have a place in this call of my life. God has his hand on me. And really, for every person in the sound of my voice, God has a plan for you. And you're not going to listen to the lies of the devil. He fights tooth and nail to keep us out of the kingdom of God. But how much greater is God fighting for us to do his will and to receive his blessings and to receive his goodness? And I, thinking about my testimony, I have to think God did great things for me. He parted Red Seas for me. He has over and over and over brought me out of darkness into his light so I could do the will of God. And to this day, I go to the prison or locally and around the surrounding areas. I go to the nursing home. We probably go to except one Sunday of the month, we go to a nursing home. I play the piano. We reach out to God's people, and we love it. I love it. I love watching God meet these people right where they are. And so many of them, when I really look at them, I think they're no different than how I was. They're no different maybe than I even am. God reached out to them, and they've come to know Jesus. And that happens to me every day. And I'm just so grateful at watching how my life has changed and me being able to help others see that God's real and their life can be different. And, part of the call of God on my life has been playing the piano. And I'll have to say, I have cried out for the hand of God and the power of God and the fire of God to burn out every note, every sound of the world, every chord, everything that I ever sang, did, listened to, or was. I want every bit of that out of me because I want what flows out of me to be the holiness of God. I want it to be pure. I want it to be what Jesus has to touch the heart of a man. And, it's an honor for me to sit in the seat that I do Sunday after Wednesday. And I'll have to think, as much as I could say, well, I know that song, or I know that song, I never know a song because I never know how God wants to do it. I want to live that way, that I'm not comfortable with how I've always done this. There's times I've sat in church and I'll play through a song And I'll hear God say, that's not the chord. And don't you ever play that one again. No man says that to me. God says it's going to be holy or it's not going to be. And I look back now and I think, no wonder the fire of God has come to me through his voice, through his word. I mean, I felt that over and over and over. It's an honor and a privilege to stand in the house of God and do what I do. And really, you know, I teach piano lessons in the Christian school. And I love that. Those children are such blessings. And they're ministers in training, just like I am for that matter. But I tell them all the time that, you know, in the Old Testament, the king, be it whichever king it was, when he had prophets and priests and ministers that played instruments all around him. And whenever he called, whenever he chose one, they were to be ready to play. They were to be ready to sing. They were to be ready to prophesy, ready to obey God. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I want the children to do. I want them to know that when the king calls, they want to be ready. And
we're just almost out of time, and I know you're going to play a song for us that God gave you. But before we do that, just with a minute or two left, I want you to share about your daughter. What a miracle that is.
Yes, God gave me a daughter, adopted me with a blessing 12 years ago. And my life has changed dramatically. I couldn't imagine life without her. And the preciousness that it was for me to be adopted and to know that God loved me and God brought parents into my life that would love me. God did the same for her. And I'm so grateful.
You adopted her as a baby. She was a baby, is that
4
right?
days, 4 days old. We got the call, and they're off to Florida. We went together. It was a blessing. So I'm grateful for that. But God gave me this song actually before I moved here because he wanted me to know how about the people of God and what blessings they were. And through a collaboration of ministers, we made some adjustments, and this is what we got. As I began to observe your life, I've seen the Lord. As I've listened to you speak, I've heard the Lord. As you've opened your heart, I've seen the beauty of the one who died for me and rose from the grave to set his people free, to live in you and me.
much, Leigh Ann. What a powerful message and a powerful song that we see Jesus in his people. And you have, haven't you? And so thank you so much, Leigh Ann. And we thank you, listeners, and we're out of time, but you've heard another powerful testimony of Jesus Christ. He loves us so much. He has his hand on us, even when we don't know it, just like Leigh Ann shared. So we encourage you today to let Jesus in your life, let him rule and reign and lead you today. This is Word of Faith Fellowship. Please go to our website. You can see more of our radio programs. That is wordoffaithfellowship.org. We are here on this radio program Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. We hope that you'll continue listening. Thank you very much.